Last week, Nigeria expanded its suspension of degree accreditation to countries like Kenya and Uganda, following a recent halt on accrediting degrees from Benin and Togo. Education Minister Tahil Mamman disclosed plans to widen this action, targeting nations where dubious institutions operate from. This move aims at curbing the influx of fraudulent qualifications from foreign degree mills, sparked by an investigative report exposing illicit practices. The minister declared that those affected are complicit in the illegal network and called for their arrest. Nigeria is launching a comprehensive investigation into ministries responsible for accrediting foreign academic qualifications, aiming to safeguard the integrity of national credentials and protect employers from fraudulent degrees. Well, Arise analyst Professor Biodun Adeniyi joins us now to discuss what could be the focus of this interministerial committee. Good to see you again on Newsday, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Good afternoon. A pleasure to be here.
Now, a lot of Nigerians regard setting up of committees by the federal government with skepticism and wariness, as over the years, these committees have yielded little or no results. Their results are usually not disclosed or they are not implemented. So I'd like to have your opinion, on this interministerial committee meant to investigate the procurement of fake degrees. What should they be looking out for? Are you optimistic that it would actually investigate and publish its report and it will be implemented?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me once again. I think what it is that sometimes government processes can be very convoluted. And of course, when you're dealing with an issue like this, there are so many agencies responsible, and one agency cannot take decisions alone. So it probably led to the decision, to have an interministerial committee putting heads together to get to the root of the problem, And of course, what we'll be expecting them to do can also be very deep-seated, and they have to be painstaking to unearth it. To unearth them, as the case could be. And there are so many things that could actually cause the problem we are having now. Well, we know what our political economy looks like. It is one that is essentially problematic in terms of the provision of infrastructure, availability of utilities, the fact that we're still a developing or maybe an underdeveloped nation, and our institutions are still very weak. People are still largely poor, and against this background, you have a culture of certification, a system where there's a lot of emphasis on the possession of certificate, maybe if not for job, but perhaps for ego, or to boost the prestige of individuals. So it leads to some level of desperation, some level of anxiety, leading to people trying to cut corners, to circumvent processes and procedures in the bid to acquire degrees, So I expect the committee to be looking at the issues from a holistic point of view, without necessarily focusing on just a dimension, and of course, eventually they are going to arrive at specifics, Yes, private universities set up in the last 15 years is essentially the focus. They welcome development, no doubt, because the suspicion is probably that some of these universities might, because they don't get allocation from government, they might be desperate for funding, for finance, and because usually when private universities are established, if they are not faith-based, if they are not organizationally based, it could be difficult for individuals, to run them because it's a very expensive project, no doubt, very expensive. So this could lead to some levels of desperation and could make them to compromise standards in the bid to make ends meet, But again, we're not saying this is the case, but it's a welcome development if government is interested in checking some of them. But I also want to believe that it's going to be a difficult task, because there's no university or there's no proprietor that would not have thought through things, to imagine setting up a university and will think that it's only through commercialization of certificates or degrees that it can make ends meet. That has that's likely to damage the reputation of that institution forever, and might even lead to the withdrawal of their license, by the NUC or the government through the NUC. It's a dangerous route to tread. I do not imagine this is happening, but it's okay that the committee is going to look at these things from a holistic point of view, so as to get to the root of the matter. If there's actually, that practice, that kind of sharp practice in our system. Overall, I think it's not a bad move.
Now, Professor Adeniyi, how easy will it be, though, to probe degree certificate racketeering, by foreign universities operating outside our shores?
Well, there are different standards, that can be applied, really. We know what it is, the conditions that you have to have a priori or in advance of setting up a university. Or rather, if the university is already licensed, we know the conditions that that university has to have, to be properly so-called, to be properly called a university. The conditions will include conducive environment, availability of utilities, facilities, library, classrooms, and of course, they have to be in a conducive environment. Then, of course, we're also talking about the human resource element, teaching and non-teaching staff, academic or non-academic staff, as you like, then the appropriate staff mix, appropriate teaching staff mix, from the professorial rank down to graduate assistantship level. All these, have to be in place, remuneration has to be appropriate as well. And of course, the NUC will have to approve your courses and probably, check again if you have the right staff mix, if the environment is there, if the facilities are there, and these things are not rocket sciences. It's not a rocket science. It's probably very easy as well to ascertain, because government through the NUC often use very experienced academics, professors in the main, to determine these things and report back. And professors are not usually known to the universities, so it can be very difficult for universities to influence them. They are blindly procured by the NUC, and they come to you. Of course, in coming to you, they too, want to be credible. They want to maintain their integrity, so they are not likely to compromise. So these processes are ongoing, and it is very easy again for NUC or for government through the NUC or through the committee in the circumstance to ascertain whether or not a university is meeting the mark. And of course, if they are not meeting the mark, it just means that the certificate that they are awarded or that they would have awarded in the past, are suspect, So that's at one level. At the other level is to check the level of productivity and efficiency of graduates, through different channels, perhaps through their alumni group or maybe through the organization that they probably found themselves. All these things, are traceable. The NUC has something they call, a tracer channel, which means that universities are expected to keep tabs, ideally with their alumni, with those who have graduated from their school. So in keeping tabs, you are able to probably eventually at some point in the future assess yourself whether you are doing well or not through the effectivity of your graduates, So the tracer system is also there, and of course NUC has very good scores for this, whether or not institutions are complying or not complying, So I think the committee at the end of the day will also look into some of these things, perhaps some more as well. Then what about feedbacks, from people? People might want to be writing petitions to them, maybe memoranda, as the case could be, just to help them spice up, their the facts, that they will be assembling for them to arrive at the appropriate recommendation for government.
Now, Professor, do you see the findings of this committee, indicting some highly placed public office holders, who are suspected or who are rumored to be holding fake degrees?
Oh, well, it's not impossible, but fake degrees, it's an age-old thing, and of course you find it at different levels. Sometimes there is even this rife argument that is common at the level of advanced degrees, masters and the doctorate degree. You see people calling them, using that title, not because they actually went through the mill, but they just fancy the prefix doctor, and eventually there's probably no substance to it. There are so many cases that have been established in the past, and there are so many allegations, suspicions, by some universities, both private and public, having awarded suspicious degrees, even at these advanced levels. But again, I've never seen a time where government was decided about checking, the veracity of some of these claims, by individuals that prefix their names with these titles. I think it's also coming against the background of, maybe the predilection of the average citizen, to hype his personality with some nebulous titling, But I've never seen a time when government thinks that the searchlight should be beamed into the veracity of claims of individuals, because some of these titles are supposed to come with some expectations in terms of behavioral patterns, in terms of professionalism, in terms of skills, in terms of inputs, outputs, etc., etc. So that government is thinking of looking at it now, it's not also bad, because it also falls within what we've been saying at different times, that you cannot prevent people from trying to circumvent processes and procedures, But the onus is on regulatory agencies to continue to up the ante and to continue to be on the mark, in trying to check, or prevent some of these things from happening. And it is in that light that I'm seeing the recent government move. And let's not forget that it's actually coming after the undercover report of AUTU. The undercover reports like that, it doesn't matter questions that we may have around it, concerning ethical issues. Undercover reports like that are likely to bring about some level of transformation, some level of reformation. And this is also coming probably to create a ground, for a new kind of change. If we are relaxing on the level of checking beforehand, before now is the time for us to rethink our process, and be much more alert, to the quality of our degrees.
Well, like you said earlier, the committee is expected to investigate private universities that have been set up, in the past 15 years. But for universities falling short of the necessary requirements, what becomes of their students, or their graduates who actually went through the process? What portion of responsibility should go to the National University Commission, for accrediting such institutions in the first instance?
Before universities are accredited or licensed, I'm convinced that there are criteria that are laid, and most of the time individuals meet this criteria. About a few months ago, NUC licensed about nearly 40 new universities. What it means is that they met the conditions, precedents, including land area, including structures on ground, including staffing, including available resources for remuneration, etc., etc. And you may not be able to fault the organization, the institution NUC that is, in passing such institutions or in licensing them, because all the conditions, expectations were met. And if an organization or an individual has met all expectations, all the conditions that you put on ground, there's no reason to deny them. What matters thereafter is if you want to, how do I put it now? If you want to be credible, ensuring that after your license, you do not deviate from the expectations of the regulatory agency. But we know the kind of system that we are in. We know how people want to cut in corners just to make ends meet. How people often try to obey the law in the breach, to obey regulations in the breach. How people hardly subscribe to values, to ethics, and in this case, we're talking about the ethics, standards that would otherwise lead to salutary ideation and intellection, And at the end of the day, I do not see what more NUC can do other than what they are doing now. Every 2 years, or really every 5 years, courses are accredited. You cannot actually mount a course without NUC's resource verification. And this resource verification are not essentially done by just NUC staff alone. Experts are recruited from outside. And of course, these experts are very experienced people, many of them trained not just in Nigeria, maybe sometimes abroad too. So they have a wide range of experience and they report back to NUC. But again, you begin to wonder, how is it possible after all these processes have been made? How is it possible for people to now mess the procedure up? But it leads us back to the extant argument that it is not about law, it's not about rules and regulations, but it's about compliance. If the people's mindsets are not oriented towards the positive, it's going to be very difficult to get laws implemented, and to get rules and regulations implemented. So if the people don't subscribe to advanced, elevated values, it doesn't matter the kind of law you put in place, what they're going to be doing oftentimes is how to make sure that those laws don't work. And that's what is leading us, to the low that we are probably in now in this respect that led once more to the setting up of this committee.
Well, I'd like us to talk about, our own educational system here in Nigeria. There's clearly, a need to strengthen the educational system so that students are not forced to go abroad to study. We hear of Nigerian students, going to Sudan, to Togo, to Benin. These are countries that you would think Nigeria has an edge over. So how do we strengthen our educational system whereby our students are not forced to go abroad? And also, how do we improve the quality of our graduates so that they can compete on a global stage?
Okay, thank you. I don't think people actually go out because of the quality of our educational system. The Nigerian population is exploding, at an astronomical proportion, like Thomas Malthus said in the 18th century. And of course, it is exploding, increasing without commensurate provision of resources, of facilities. And we have limited universities, arguably, and the universities have limited carrying capacities as well. So when students who are desperate for certificates don't get admitted, they look elsewhere. And that's why you see them going to Benin, going to Togo because of desperation. And probably they know that if they do not get one kind of certificate or the other, they are going to be at a disadvantage in terms of job opportunities, in terms of pride, in terms of prestige, in terms of reputation, in terms of the ability to raise their shoulders in the midst of peers, So some of these things actually come together to explain the situation you just painted. But if we want to talk about quality, I think we're not doing badly in terms of our ability to have quality, to produce quality graduates. There are situations where many of our graduates everywhere in public and private universities have gone to universities abroad, even in the reputable Western societies, and have done excellently well. There are so many cases that we can raise to justify this argument, and some of them have done well and are still doing well where they are. Some of our professors, some of our lecturers too, have had, outstanding training abroad, and they are there populating our universities and impacting the rightful knowledge. Most of the knowledge, most of the ideas, the notions that we even parrot here are foreign and essentially Western. So our notions, our ideas, our pedagogy is actually modeled after the Western model. Our textbooks, our theories, are funded largely after the Western models, And sometimes when we want to be original or creative, looking at our own local environment, they are actually, the plank is also Western or largely foreign. So it's not necessarily, I will say again that it's not because of quality that they are going out, but if we want to improve quality, the simple things that we can say is what ASU has been saying over the years, that our universities need to be better funded, the education sector generally need to be better funded. And of course, so many arguments have been made around the UNESCO recommendation, for improved funding of our budget, so that universities or institutions generally can provide better for infrastructure, for utilities, realizing that, institutions are usually capital intensive. You need good environment, good roads, good classrooms, appropriate remuneration for human resources, academic, non-academic, an ability to also connect to the new digital world so that current modern, e-resources can be available, for research against the background of the fast-changing pace of knowledge, and ideation, all these things have to be in place, for us to jack up the quality of pedagogy, again, the quality, or maybe the quality of our education overall at the end of the day.
Now, some people are also calling for the cutoff marks for JAMB, to be reviewed, or even for the exam to be scrapped completely. What are your thoughts on this?
It's going to be difficult if you imagine the reasons why JAMB was set up in the first instance. It was to bring about some level of uniformity. And I'm not going to subscribe to that because I do know that cutoff marks for universities vary. If University A would not give you an opportunity, you can seek opportunity in University B. And if University B is still raising some questions, University C is also there. Massively, we are having the numbers of our universities are actually expanding. You can always get the opportunity to study where the chance is available. And it's also possible, plausible, because the content, it's the same, and the content of programs is largely the same between universities, just like the style of teaching might be different. The contents are largely dictated, prescribed by the National Universities Commission, so it is the reason why somebody from University A might be able to match somebody from the University B, in terms of ideas, in terms of understanding if they are serious candidates, as the case could be, So I don't know. I don't think we should scrap it. You have to understand that there has to be some uniformity at some level in every country that I'm familiar with. I know that institutions are not left, to take some fundamental decisions alone. The regulatory authorities have levels of unifying them so that there can be a sense of synergy in terms of their productivity, as the case could be.
Professor Biodun Adeniyi, a RISE analyst, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.